Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. "Abraham," God called. "Yes," he replied, "here I am." "Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you." The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. "Stay here with the donkey," Abraham told the servants. "The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there, and then we will come right back." So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "We have the fire and the wood," the boy said. "But where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" "God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son," Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood, and Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Yes," Abraham replied, "here I am." "Don't lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son." Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. "This is what the Lord says. Because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies, and through your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me." Then they returned to the servants and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor 8 sons. The oldest was named Uz, the next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, the ancestor of the Arameans, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, Nahor had 4 other children from his concubine Roimah. Their names were Teba, Gaham, Tahash, and Makkah.
Notice how some stories, they just stick with you. They get passed down, reinterpreted, but somehow stay relevant for like centuries. That's what we're diving into today, the story of Abraham and Isaac. You'll find it in the book of Genesis, chapter 22. It's a foundational story in the Abrahamic faith.
Yeah, a cornerstone.
But even if you're not approaching this from a religious angle, the story wrestles with these, well, universal themes, faith, sacrifice, trusting in something bigger than yourself. So for anyone unfamiliar, we're dealing with a pretty major moment in the Bible. We're hit right away with this command from God to Abraham, a command to sacrifice his son Isaac.
And it's not just any sacrifice, right? We're talking about Isaac, the long-awaited son, the heir, the one who represents God's promise to Abraham actually coming true. The promise to make him the father of a whole nation. It's a request that, well, immediately forces us to ask what faith and obedience might actually demand.
From the get-go, you get this stark, almost cinematic image. Abraham getting up early, saddling his donkey, calling his men. They've got a 3-day journey ahead of them, and you just feel the weight of what's coming.
What's so interesting is how the text shows us Isaac's perspective, too. We see him, this young man, asking his father about the lamb they need for the sacrifice. And Abraham's answer, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. It's a phrase packed with meaning.
Gives you chills, doesn't it? That line, it's echoed through history. But in that moment, you wonder, was that true confidence? Or maybe a touch of desperation, like he was pleading both to himself and to Isaac.
Exactly. And that's where it becomes more than a simple obedience story. We see the inner struggle, the human element behind this huge event. Did Abraham really believe right then that God would provide? Or was it doubt, fear, even anger going through his mind? Scholars and theologians still debate this, even now.
And I think that's right for a deep dive. It doesn't give us easy answers, throws us right into the middle of things. Makes us confront these timeless questions about faith and, the potential cost if you're blindly devoted to something. So let's unpack this a bit more. We've got this mounting tension, this journey full of unspoken fears, and now we're about to see something really significant unfold.
Yeah, and the tension, it just keeps building as they get to the place, You can practically feel how heavy each action is. Abraham building the altar, setting the wood in place, all while knowing what he's been told to do.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You can't look away even though you know what's about to happen.
Exactly, and the text doesn't shy away from the emotion, not at all. This isn't like some abstract theological debate. It's real. A father and a son, connected by love, but also by this divine command that just seems to go against everything we think we know about compassion and mercy.
And just when you think it can't get any more intense, we reach that pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Abraham lifts the knife.
It's a moment that's captivated people for, millennia. Artists, writers, theologians, you see it in paintings, sculptures, you even hear it in music. It shows you how powerful this story is, this clash between faith and, just our human need to protect our own family.
And right when it's at its peak, we get the angel stepping in.
Like something out of a movie, right? The angel calls out, stops Abraham just in time. It's almost like we finally get to breathe again.
What a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But it doesn't end there, right? Then we have the ram appearing.
And not just any ram, one that's got its horns caught in a thicket. It's like the text is saying, see, this was all meant to be.
Which brings us to that line again. God will provide. Abraham says it, almost like he's trying to reassure himself. And now we see it through this, divine intervention.
It's a phrase that's resonated throughout the Abrahamic faiths, given people comfort and hope when they're uncertain. But it also makes you think about how we interpret the story.
Is it just a last-minute replacement for Isaac? Or is there something deeper going on, something more symbolic?
Right. And that's where things get interesting. Over time, this story's been understood in a lot of different ways. Some people, they see it as simply about obeying God no matter what, even when it seems impossible. Or,
which I think for a lot of people
wrong.
today, that's a tough thing to swallow.
Absolutely. And that's why there are other interpretations that focus on different parts of the story. Like some scholars argue it's not actually about sacrifice, literally, but about testing Abraham's faith, showing he's willing to give up even what he loves.
So it's not about the
most
act
to
itself,
God.
but about what's happening inside, right? The willingness to believe even when it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And this way of seeing it makes the story's message more complex. It's about the struggles of faith, the doubts, the uncertainty, and in the end, surrendering to
It's
something
like it's
beyond
holding up
ourselves.
a mirror, making us look at our own struggles with
Yeah.
believing, with doubting.
Exactly. And then after the sacrifice, or, almost sacrifice,
Right.
it gets even
We can't
more
forget about,
complex.
how Abraham is rewarded after he shows he's willing to go through with this incredibly hard thing. Talk about a reward for faith and obedience.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting that the story goes from this personal crisis of faith to something much bigger. The promises to Abraham, a huge nation, more descendants than you can count. They're all confirmed again here. It's like this moment. It makes him more than just a man of faith. He becomes like a patriarch,
Makes you
a
think about the
foundation
impact
for
of this
whole
story,
religion.
It's not just in Genesis, it's everywhere. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, even just ideas about being a good person, they've all wrestled with this.
It shows you how powerful it is. It can be read on so many levels. For some, it's simple, just obeying God. For others, it's about faith, doubt, what God is really like. And then some, they even see it as a warning.
So
A warning
after all
about
this
following
time,
blindly.
thousands of years after this story was first told. What are we supposed to take from it? Us now listening to this deep dive into the binding of Isaac.
I think the power is in the conversation it starts. It challenges what we think we know, makes us really think about our own beliefs. It's not about finding the right answer. It's more about sitting
So
with the
looking at
big
ourselves as much as
questions.
we look at the story, right?
Right.
Because, I mean, most of us, we aren't going to have to sacrifice our kids, but we all have times when our faith, whatever that means for us, is really tested.
Exactly. We've all got our own mountains to climb, our own impossible choices. And that's where Abraham and Isaac, it reminds us. Faith is complicated, sacrifice is heavy, and sometimes you just
It's a
got to
story
wrestle
that
with
gets
what you
under your
don't
skin.
know.
You keep thinking about it. Maybe you lose some sleep over those big questions. And if this deep dive did that for you, well, then we did our job. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, keep diving deep.